A man answered an ad that read, "Hiring welders $18.24 per hour." When he arrived, he was told he'd have to take a welding test. He turned in 2 sets of welds. One was a great weld. The other was a mess. When the boss asked him why he did this, he replied, "One is $18 per hour, the other is $24 per hour." An elderly couple was driving across the country. The wife was behind the wheel when they were pulled over by the highway patrol. The officer approached and said, "Ma'am, did you know you were speeding?" The woman, hard of hearing, turned to her husband and asked, "What did he say?" The old man yelled back, "He says you were speeding." The patrolman continued, "May I see your license?" Again, the woman turned to her husband and asked, "What did he say?" The old man replied loudly, "He wants to see your license." The woman handed her license to the officer. He inspected it and remarked, "I see you are from Arkansas. I spent some time there once and went on a blind date with the ugliest woman I've ever seen." Once more, the woman turned to her husband and asked, "What did he say?" Without missing a beat, the old man shouted, "He said he knows your mother." A group of professors boarded a plane for a special trip. Just as the doors closed and the plane was about to take off, they were informed, "This plane was entirely built by your students." Panic immediately spread. Professors scrambled for the exits, desperate to escape. But one professor sat calmly, showing no fear. Curious, someone asked him, "Why aren't you running like the rest of us?" With a confident smile, the professor replied, "I know my students." "Are you sure you taught them well enough?" the person asked. The professor chuckled and said, "Oh, I'm sure. That's why I know this plane will never get off the ground." John O'Reilly hoisted his beer and said, "Here's to spending the rest of me life between the legs of me wife." That won him the top prize for the best toast of the night. He went home and told his wife, Mary, "I won the prize for the best toast of the night." She said, "Aye, what was your toast?" John said, "Here's to spending the rest of me life sitting in church beside me wife." Mary said, "Oh, that is very nice indeed, John." The next day, Mary ran into one of John's toasting friends on the street corner. The man chuckled leeringly and said, "John won the prize the other night with a toast about you, Mary." She said, "Aye, and I was a bit surprised myself. You know, he's only been there twice. Once he fell asleep, and the other time I had to pull him by the ears to make him come." An elderly man accidentally collided with a luxurious sports car. The owner of the sports car steps out angrily and says, "Pay me $20,000 in cash, or you'll regret it." The old man, startled, responds, "Hold on, I don't have that kind of money, but let me call my kid. He works with marine animals." The old man takes out his phone, but before he can say a word, the owner grabs it and says into the receiver, "So, you work with marine animals? Your dad just damaged my car, and I expect $20,000 immediately." The son calmly replies, "All right, give me 20 minutes, I'll be there." Exactly 20 minutes later, a rugged truck rolls up. A group of uniformed individuals step out and firmly address the situation. The son walks over to his father, smiles, and says, "Dad, I don't work with marine animals. I train special forces." One evening, a man tests his son's future career by placing a $10 bill, a whiskey bottle, and a Bible on the table. If he takes the money, he'll be a banker. The whiskey? A drunk? The Bible? A preacher, he explains to his wife. The son enters, examines each item, then takes the money, grabs the whiskey, and tucks the Bible under his arm. The father exclaims, "Well, looks like he's going to be a politician." A young blonde woman had been married for about a year when one day she came running up to her husband, jumping for joy. Not knowing how to react, the husband started jumping up and down along with her. "Why are we so happy?" he asked. She replied, "Honey, I have some really great news for you." "Great," he said. "Tell me what you're so happy about." She stopped breathless from all the jumping up and down. "I'm pregnant," she gasped. The husband was ecstatic, as they had been trying for a while. He grabbed her, kissed her, and started telling her how wonderful it was and that he couldn't be happier. Then she said, "Oh, honey, there's more." "What do you mean more?" he asked. "Well, we are not having just one baby. We are going to have twins." Amazed at how she could know so soon after getting pregnant, he asked her how she knew. "It was easy," she said. "I went to the pharmacy and bought the 2-pack home pregnancy test kit. Dirt. And both tests came out positive." Dorothy and Edna, two senior widows, are talking. Dorothy: "That nice George Johnson asked me out for a date. I know you went out with him last week, and I wanted to talk with you about him before I give him my answer." Edna: "Well, I'll tell you. He shows up at my apartment punctually at 7 p.m., dressed like such a gentleman in a fine suit, and he brings me such beautiful flowers. Then he takes me downstairs, and what's there but a luxury car? A limousine, uniformed chauffeur and all. Then he takes me out for dinner. A marvelous dinner. Lobster, champagne, dessert, and after-dinner drinks. Then we go to see a show. Let me tell you, Dorothy, I enjoyed it so much, I could have just died from pleasure. So then we are coming back to my apartment, and he turns into an animal, completely crazy. He tears off my expensive new dress and has his way with me 2 times. Dorothy: "Goodness gracious! So you are telling me I shouldn't go out with him?" Edna: No, no, no. I'm just saying, wear an old dress." One cool evening, an elderly woman was taking her evening stroll with her trusty little dog, Max. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the quiet neighborhood as they meandered down the familiar streets. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a young man dashed past them, snatching the purse she was carrying and sprinting away at full speed. Startled but not panicked, the woman watched him go, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. A couple across the street witnessed the whole thing and rushed over to see if she was all right. "We saw everything," the husband exclaimed. "Don't worry, we've already called the police. They should be here any minute," the wife added, concern etched on her face. To their surprise, the elderly woman let out a hearty laugh. "Oh, bless your hearts! But there's no need to worry," she said, grinning from ear to ear. "You see, I only carry that old purse to hold Max's poop bags until we get home. I can just imagine the look on that thief's face when he opens it up." The couple couldn't help but burst into laughter, the tension of the moment dissolving into shared amusement. As they waited for the police to arrive, they couldn't stop chuckling at the thought of the thief's unfortunate discovery. Max wagged his tail happily, oblivious to the chaos, while the elderly woman winked at him, feeling quite pleased with her unintentional prank. After a little accident, the doctor said, "Miss, could you lower your pants?" The blonde smirked and replied, "I'll lower them, but only on one condition." Curious, the doctor asked, "What condition?" She leaned in and whispered, "You promise not to tell anyone they fit you better than me." The day after his wife disappeared in a kayaking accident, an Anchorage man answered his door to find 2 grim-faced Alaska State Troopers. "We're sorry, Mr. Wilkins, but we have some information about your wife," said one trooper. "Tell me, did you find her?" Wilkins shouted. The troopers looked at each other. One said, "We have some bad news, some good news, and some really great news. Which do you want to hear first?" Fearing the worst, an ashen Mr. Wilkins said, "Give me the bad news first." The trooper said, "I'm sorry to tell you, sir, but this morning we found your wife's body in Kakimak Bay." "Oh my God!" exclaimed Wilkins. Swallowing hard, he asked, "What's the good news?" The trooper continued, "When we pulled her up, She had 12 25-pound king crabs and 6 good-sized Dungeness crabs clinging to her, and we feel you are entitled to a share in the catch." Stunned, Mr. Wilkins demanded, "If that's the good news, what's the great news?" The trooper said, "We're going to pull her up again tomorrow." In Ireland, there is a tradition that holds that a dying man may ask one last question, and that it be answered truthfully. Seamus had come to the end of his days. His time on this planet was short. Gathered around him was his wife and his 4 sons. 3 of his sons were fine, tall men, but the 4th wasn't. Aidan was a bit scrawny and quite thin. Seamus says to his wife, "Mary, I've not much time left, so I want to ask you something that's bothered me for many a day. Please tell me the truth. Is Aidan really my son?" Mary says, "Seamus, as God is my witness, I swear on all that's good and holy that Aidan is indeed your child." With that, Seamus breathed a sigh of relief, his last breath in this world. Mary closed his eyes, pulled the blanket over his face, and said, "Ooh, thank God he didn't ask about the other 3. A little boy and a little girl attended the same school and became good friends. Every day at lunch, they would sit together and discovered that they both brought chicken sandwiches every single day. This went on throughout the 4th and 5th grades, until one day, the boy noticed that the girl wasn't eating a chicken sandwich. He asked, "Hey, how come you're not eating chicken? Don't you like it anymore?" She replied, "I love it, but I have to stop eating it." "Why?" he asked, curious. She pointed to her lap and whispered, "Because I'm starting to grow little feathers down there." Surprised, he said, "Let me see." "Okay," she agreed and showed him. He looked and said, "You're right, you better not eat any more chicken." The boy continued to eat his chicken sandwiches, but one day he showed up with a peanut butter sandwich instead. The girl noticed and asked why he had switched. He leaned in and said, "I have to stop eating chicken sandwiches. I'm starting to get feathers down there too." Intrigued, she asked if she could look, so he showed her. She gasped and exclaimed, "Oh my God, it's too late for you. You've already got the neck and gizzards." The king wanted to go fishing, and he asked the royal weather forecaster the forecast for the next few hours. The palace meteorologist assured him that there was no chance of rain. So the king and the queen went fishing. On the way, he met a man with a fishing pole riding on a donkey, and he asked the man if the fish were biting. The fisherman said, "Your Majesty, you should return to the palace. In just a short time, I expect a huge rainstorm." The king replied, "I hold the palace meteorologist in high regard. He is an educated and experienced professional. Besides, I pay him very high wages. He gave me a very different forecast. I trust him." So the king continued on his way. However, in a short time, a torrential rain fell from the sky. The king and queen were totally soaked. Furious, the king returned to the palace and gave the order to fire the meteorologist. Then he summoned the fisherman and offered him the prestigious position of royal forecaster. The fisherman said, "Your Majesty, I do not know anything about forecasting. I obtain my information from my donkey. If I see my donkey's ears drooping, it means with certainty that it will rain." So the king hired the donkey, and thus began the practice of hiring dumb asses to work in influential positions of government. The practice is unbroken to this date. A rabbit hops into a pub and asks the bartender, "Could I get a pint of beer and a ham and cheese toastie?" The bartender is taken aback, but serves the rabbit his order. The rabbit enjoys his beer, devours the toastie, and then leaves. The next night, the rabbit returns and once again requests a pint of beer and a ham and cheese toastie. Word has spread, and the pub is buzzing with curious patrons. The bartender serves the rabbit, who eats and drinks before heading out. By the third night, the pub is packed to the brim. As the rabbit walks in and orders as usual, the crowd falls silent in anticipation. The bartender hands over the pint and toastie. and the room erupts in applause as the rabbit finishes his meal and exits. On the fourth night, there's standing room only. People have traveled from far and wide just to witness this unusual guest. The bartender is making more money in a week than he did all of last year. But when the rabbit walks in and asks for his usual, the bartender's face falls. "I'm sorry, my friend," he says, "but we're all out of ham and cheese toasties." The rabbit looks shocked, and the pub goes so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The bartender nervously offers, "But we do have a very nice cheese and onion toastie. I promise you'll love it." The rabbit eyes him carefully. "Are you sure?" he asks. With a grin, the bartender replies, "I wouldn't steer you wrong. Trust me, you'll love it." "All right," says the rabbit. "I'll have a pint of beer and a cheese and onion toastie." The pub bursts into cheers as the rabbit enjoys his meal, waves to the crowd, and leaves, never to return. A year later, the pub is in decline. The bartender, who has only served a handful of drinks that night, most of them to himself, calls last orders. As he's cleaning up, he notices a small white figure hovering above the bar. "Who are you?" he asks. "I'm the ghost of the rabbit who used to visit your pub," comes the reply. The bartender's eyes widen. "I remember you. You made this place famous. Every night, you'd come in for a pint of beer and a ham and cheese toastie. People came from miles around just to see you." "Yes," the rabbit says, "but I also remember that last night when you ran out of ham and cheese toasties, you gave me a cheese and onion toastie instead." "That's right," the bartender recalls, "but then you never came back. What happened?" "I died," says the rabbit. The bartender gasps. "No! How?" The rabbit pauses before replying, "Mixin' me toasties." Quick reminder, every 1,000 subscribers and likes equals $100 to help a senior in need. Hit that subscribe button now and be a part of this.